We are about to go over the passages that includes everything that we have learned here in Latin 2 this year up until place constructions and deponents. You'll find no place constructions. Also, too, is that we will, as normal, have as a proof video certain items that you'll be able to put into Canvas for an easy and free 100. I apologize in the future, but there are going to be 13 of them because the Latin 2 class of 2024-2025 are going to help me give you the proof video stuff. So here we go. We will begin. Cornelius is our main clause subject with sperat. Cornelius hopes. He is hoping. He does hope right now because it's present tense. Then what we have is an indirect statement. Remember, the indirect statement is going to have an accusative subject, and so therefore that would be either say or kanam, and an infinitive finite verb, oxymoronic. Because it is a future infinitive, that means the action is going to have to happen after the hoping. Cornelius hopes that he himself will give the best dinner, or that the best dinner will give him. Obviously that doesn't make sense, so that means that this is your accusative subject, and this is your accusative direct object of the indirect statement. We continue on. The situation here, we start out with an ablative, and an ablative participle set off by commas. This must be an ablative absolute. And so therefore, it says, with the slave ladies bringing trays, certain trays larger, bigger, by a lot, ablative of degree of difference than shields. And so remember that the ablative absolute is going to take the place of an actual subordinate clause, but we use the word with. And that brings us to our very first word.
Hi, I'm Klakita from class of 2027, and your first item of this proof video is absolute. A-B-S-O-L-U-T-E, absolute.
Very good. In case you're curious, English name, Hannah Elasri. You might want to give them the English too. But that was great. We move on. With the slave ladies bringing trays, certain trays, bigger by a lot than even shields, and another subordinating word. After they had, pluperfect passive, been called by Cornelius into the dining room, ad convivas serviendas. Remember that it is for the sake of either serving the guests or for the sake of the guests about to be served. Here it is for the sake of the guests about to be served. This tells me automatically it is a gerundive, and it's doing what gerundivs do, which is to modify. If you were to convert this from a gerundive phrase into a gerund phrase, it would still have odd, but now what you would see is that it would have serviendum, and it is for the purpose of serving, and then dinner guests would be convivas, the accusative direct object of that gerund. Gerundivs modify, whereas gerunds are going to have often accusative direct objects. So, after they had been called, you go to your main clause. Water and the best wine. Must be Falernian. That stuff. Perfect passive. Were poured out, have been poured out into, in plus accusative, the goblets of the dinner guests by the same slaves. Is a id with a dem is going to mean the same, whereas qui quod with a dam. So, it is at this point, having had that gerundive phrase to show purpose, that brings us to our second item to be put in.
Hi, I'm Animosa, or Alyssa Guerrero. Your second word that, class of 2027, your second word that you will be putting in is purpose. P-U-R-P-O-S-E, purpose.
Very good. And that is exactly what ad, gratia, and causa, that we see later on, and then gratia will appear as well, that are going to come up too. So we continue. Convivi, the dinner guests. Canoe, we again have a verb of mental action. That verb of mental action of canoeing starts off in the past. That means that whatever infinitive we have in our indirect statement that is going to have either an accusative subject or an accusative direct object, it is going to obviously have an infinitive verb relative to that action. Our infinitive is de disse, a perfect active infinitive, and therefore I know since it is perfect, it needs to indicate action before, which means that we need to express the giving as going in the past since we are starting off in the past. The dinner guests knew that Cornelius had given the best dinner, or that the best dinner had given Cornelius. Obviously, it makes more sense with Cornelium being the accusative subject and optimum canam being the accusative direct object of that oxymoronic finite infinitive. We move on to sentence number 2, or section number 2. The mercator, the merchant. And here what we see is yet another ablative absolute, in which we have an ablative noun and an ablative perfect passive participle. The words with need to come out of our mouth. With the price having been heard, the merchant said to Sudeless, Quem porcum, which pig do you want to buy? If we were to erase the porcum, we would say, which one or whom do you want to buy? Here it is an interrogative pronoun. Now it is an interrogative adjective because it is modifying porcum. Ile. That one is fatter, I-O-R, comparative, by a little bit than the others. But this one, so we're comparing two pigs, that pig and this pig, has been fed, has been pastured, was fed, was pastured, pasco, pascere, by my hand in my fields. Advantage of that one, more plump. Advantage of this one, we know exactly what kind of care that we would obviously expect. And that brings us to item number 3 to be put in.
Hi, my name is Superbly, and or Christian Sims, and the third item is comparative, C-O-M-P-A-R-A-T-I-V-E.
As you can tell from that weirdness, that's not his real voice, but that's okay. And it is comparative, because we have one right there. We keep going. Certe. Certainly something. Anything. If it were aliquis, it'd be someone, masculine or feminine, because it is neuter, something. If we were to decline it, it would be just like qui, quod, cuius, but just with an ali on it. And then qui with an ali on it, and so forth and so on. Certainly something, a future passive paraphrastic
obligation,
future passive paraphrastic
dative of agent,
something in the future will have to be bought. Normally datives are translated to or for, but because it's a dative of agent, we will say by. Something must be bought by you. He then goes on to ask another question. To which merchant will you go? It is an interrogative adjective, but if it were just to stand on its own, it is now going to become an interrogative pronoun. To whom will you go? If not, except, unless, to me. And then we have another gerund or gerundive phrase that is expressing purpose. For the sake of meat about to be bought. I know that this is a gerundive because it's doing what gerundives do. It's modifying. If we were to turn it into a gerund, we would still have the word causa, but then what we would see is that it would be amen d, the genitive object of causa, and then we would make the meat as the direct object accusative of the gerund, which would be, of course, carnem. That is then the equivalency. And so, to which merchant will we go except to me? For the sake of meat about to be bought, for the sake of buying meat. That brings us to our next item, number 4, that you are going to be putting in for a free 100. Apologies about the length of it, but oh well.
Hi, I'm Clara, or Clara, class of 2027, and your fourth word is interrogative. I-N-T-E-R-O-G-A-T-I-V-E. Interrogative.
I will put it into Canvas that you can spell it with 1 R or even 2 R's. Up to you. Nevertheless, quis meliorum carnem quam ego vendit. Who sells meliorum carnem, better meat than I. We are using quam as our comparison word. If we want to, we could simply take out all of that and merely put the ablative may. Ego, me, me, may. And it would still mean than I. Finally, quis taberna, whose shop indeed. Notice the word quidim. It is a qui with a dim, but it's not a qui qui quod with a d-a-m, a certain, nor is it is-a-id with a d-e-m. And so when it is neither of those, it's just the adverb indeed, whose shop is sought, is looked for more than mine. Again, we could get rid of all of that and merely put it into the ablative. With a comparative, the ablative, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, than. And at the end of number 2, that brings us to our very next item, which happens to at the same time be the very student who is recording this as our cinematographer, our very own Alfonso Cuarón Potains.
This is Abraham Rangel, and your next word is certe, C-E-R-T-E.
Thank you. Certainly a positive adverb, to be sure. We move on to number 3. Porco empto. So, that is obviously an ablative absolute. And so I know that I've given my students a order. We're going to break the order for the next one because obviously we're going to feature the ablative absolute not quite yet, but be on the ready. With the pig having been bought, comma, the slave himself ought or owes, debeo debere, to be praised, a present passive infinitive, magis. Again, the comparative of magnopere. That would mean greatly, that means more greatly, but you can just leave off the word greatly. By so much, an ablative of degree difference, than the butcher. Again, you can get rid of the quam and merely put butcher, lanio, in the ablative. So it says, the slave himself ought to be praised more than the butcher by so much, quod, because so big a price had not been given pluperfect passive. The price, pretium quod. So the first quod means because. It's what we call a causal quod. The second quod is the relative qui, qui, quod. Quis, 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 qui, 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 quem, quam, quod. Which was being sought, so that's the nominative with a passive verb, by the merchant. Which merchant? The merchant seeking as much as possible. Thus bringing us to our next item, our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th item to be put in.
Hey, I'm Salsa, or Marin Pointer, and your 6th word is porco empto. P-O-R-C-O
Space.
Space. 1 space. E-M-P-T-O.
Please only put EMP one time. Great job. We move on. Suitless quidem. Again, not qui qui quod with the D-A-M, not is-a-id with the D-E-M. So that's the one that means indeed. Suitless indeed, comma. When we get to that comma, we circle it. We note the ablative. We circle it. We note the ablative. It's another ablative absolute. With the dinner guests about to arrive, a future active participle, ad canam addendam, for the sake of dinner about to be eaten. This is a gerundive because it is not one of the 4 gerund forms. To be a gerund form, it would have to end in either long I in the genitive, long O in the dative, um in the accusative, or long O in the ablative. Those are the only 4 forms, and thus we have a form not one of those. If we were to turn this into a gerund, it would be odd, a dane doom, for the sake of eating, and then canam would be your accusative direct object of that gerund. So with the dinner guests about to arrive, for the sake of the dinner about to be eaten, for the sake of eating dinner, suitless indeed, having been sent. So again, what you do is you look for your subject, look for your verb. I stopped in my tracks when I got to mesus because it's from a verb. Mito, mitere, misi, mesus, and I lingered because indeed it is a nominative modifying the subject. So let's go ahead and deal with it. Having been sent to the shop of a certain merchant. I knew that quisdam was modifying the genitive merchant and not the accusative shop because we look at the quis part, not the dom part, to figure out what it's modifying. And so, to the shop of a certain merchant, a merchant better, by a lot, ablative degree of difference, and then your ablative of comparison, than any other merchant. If we were to have used a quam, remember that when you use a quam, you must put the thing you are comparing in the exact same case as what you are comparing it to. And so therefore, since merchant is in the genitive, ulius, because it's one of the naughty nine, alias, because it's one of the naughty nine, and then mercatoris, if we were, of course, using the quam. Having been sent to the shop of a certain merchant better, by a lot, than any other merchant, la dondus est. Future passive periphrastic obligation. Future passive periphrastic
Dative of agent.
and there we can see that dative of agent. And so it says, he, the one having been sent, must right now be praised by the dative mistress. Again, a purpose clause, for the sake. This does not modify that, so it must be a gerund that has an accusative direct object. For the sake of receiving the best price. Now, it's at this time we come to our seventh word, because we have encountered it. Seventh word.
Hi, my name is Kenora, or Elaine McNutt, and your sixth class of 2027, and your seventh word is accipienti. ACCIPIENDI.
Very good. Our gerund. If we were to turn it into a gerundive, still with gratia, but now we would need this to be the genitive object of gratia, so optimi pretii, and then we need accipiendi to be in a form to modify it, which is going to be accipiendi. So here accipiendi is the genitive object of gratia, but here the accipiendi is the form to modify optimi pretii. It says in the black, for the sake of receiving the best price, in the pink, for the sake of the best price about to be received. And so when we indeed are moving on to number 4, that will bring us to our next and 8th item to be delivered by one of the students of Latin 2 2024-2025.
I'm Madeline Shembry, class of 2027, and your 8th item is Canam, C-E-N-A-M.
Very good. All righty, Canam in the accusative, to be sure. We move on to number 4. Thanks for bearing with me, future students watching this video. Heek, here. Hick, this. I intentionally put them near each other so you can tell the difference. Hopefully, in live time, everybody is watching this proof video and benefiting from when we take the quiz in groups tomorrow. Here in the triclinium, that's the dining room, so for the 3-couch arrangement. This food, blue always means main clause. I'm looking for my verb and I found it. These 2 letters are AD. So, ferro ferre tulilatis will have been a future perfect passive, will have been brought in by slaves, ablative of personal agent, the ones running hither and thither more quickly than rabbits. If we wanted to not use the quam, all we'd have to do is leporibus. Put it in the ablative. Now, it is the exact same because with the quam, ablative comparative to ablative. Without the quam, ablative of comparison. By, with, because of, from, in, on, at, rabbits. Semicolon. We continue. Very strong wine. Merum, unmixed stuff. But in the modern world, we call it fortified wine, like port or sherry. Nevertheless, very strong wine. Also, and I am going to look for, that is from a verb, but I'm not going to pause there because it's orderum, it's not modifying the venum. And here is finally my verb, ferro ferre tulilatis. That has obligation. That tells me in the future, very strong wine will have to be brought in, dative of agent, by the same slaves. Normally agent with a run-of-the-mill passive expression is your ablative of personal agent with an ob or an ah. But with a future passive periphrastic nd, you have a dative of agent by the same slaves for the sake of, and here we have a gerundive, cups about to be filled. If we were to turn this into a not gerundive phrase, but a gerund, we would still use causa. But now we would make this the gerund genitive object, complendi, and we would make poculorum, which is neuter plural, the accusative direct object, misspelled it, pocula. And so, in the black, for the sake of the cups about to be filled, in the blue, for the sake of filling the accusative direct object, cups. And so, that brings us to our ninth word that is going to be presented by a member of the class of, I'll let them tell you, but this is Latin 2, 2024-2025.
I'm Longa, or Kaylin Batts, class of 2027, and your next word is comparison. C-O-M-P-A-R-I-S-O-N, comparison.
Very good. Like we just a second ago compared the gerundive phrase in black versus the blue phrase, which of course is the gerund. And I think that was the ninth word. Am I correct in that assessment? So very good. So make sure that one's in there. Dang, dang. Then, let's get rid of all that distraction. That same food will be carried away. AU on Pharaoh Ferry is the equivalency of the ob. Now, we all know that Pharaoh Ferry is irregular, but we know that wolo, wele, wolui, nolo, nole, no lui, Pharaoh Ferre, tulilatus are wannabes. They want to be third. And what does a long E mean in a third? It means future. Will be carried away by the same slaves. Again, here you see the same phrase, a eastem serum, a eastem. But here we had the ah, meaning an ablative of personal agent, because it wasn't a future passive periphrastic. When it is a future passive periphrastic, dative of agent. Hopefully you're paying attention. Tandem at last. The goblets. I will stop. Comes from a verb. Compleo, complere, complevi, completus, meaning to fill. I linger because it is modifying my neuter, plural, nominative subject. Having been filled by other certain slaves with wine, those cups will be passively, futurely carried away by the slaves. Which bring us to our 10th item to be put in here. Mercifully, there are only 13. That's a lot. But at least the class right now is getting this proof video in live time. Number 10.
Hi, my name is Zyla La or Masalenta, and your 10th word is seamed. S-E-E-M-E-D.
Which is coming up in just a second in our very last sentence. And so it says, Omnes conviva, all the dinner guests, and there it is. The verb video videre, when it is passive, can either mean to be seen, or, as Makalenta just told us, to seem. It is obviously perfect, passive, and so therefore, they seemed, They did seem, they have seemed. Two things. A perfect passive infinitive, to have been served well, and then a perfect active infinitive, to have praised, all neuter, plural, accusative, substantized things. So, I think our 3 remaining items are all from the 5th section, so we will go on with that and hopefully bring this video to a close. It says, another ablative absolute set off by commas, ablative noun, ablative participle, happens to be a future active, with the dinner guests about to arrive, main clause. Oil, and I stop at fusum. From fundo, fundere, fudi, fusus, meaning to pour. It's a perfect passive participle, and I linger because it is indeed modifying the oil. Having been poured into the candelabra, into the lampstand, lucem dandi gratia, for the sake of giving light. Gerund with an accusative direct object. If I were to turn this into a gerundive phrase, we would still use gratia, but it would be for the sake of the light, lucis, and light happens to be a feminine word, so it would be don dye, modifying it. So again, the black for the sake of giving light, the blue for the sake of the light about to be given. So that oil, having been poured for that reason, it, present tense, is poured out, EX, into the beds, onto the beds, by the slave ladies. And it's at this time that we will then take on our 11th item that will be given to you by a student of Latin 2, 2024-2025.
I'm Layra Madeline O'Brien. Your 11th word is sparrow. S-P-E-R-O, sparrow.
Indeed, we're going to get to it soon enough. Down here, I hope, a verb of mental action that will definitely give it to us an indirect statement. But we continue still up here. Another main clause. Cornelius sees that. We have an indirect statement on our hands. Again, to get rid of all the cluster and keep it with the main clause, we need an accusative subject. That's accusative plural neuter. That's accusative singular feminine. And so therefore, our verb, which we need to replace this E with an A. It should be capere, a present active infinitive. As per usual, let's draw our timeline. And that starts us off at that spot there. Our present infinitive is going to happen at the same time. Cornelius sees that the sheets catch fire, or that the fires, or fire singular, catch sheets. Obviously, it makes better sense for strata to be the accusative subject and ignum to be the accusative direct object of our oxymoronic finite infinitive as the finite infinitive of the indirect statement. Nevertheless, sheets or fire, which extinguenda sunt. Future passive paraphrastic obligation. Future passive paraphrastic dative of agent. Nevertheless, which must be extinguished quam celerime, as quickly as possible, by Cornelius. Normally datives translate to or for, but when it's an agent, by, and by the slaves. We then quickly enter into another habitable absolute. With which these, or just simply make it with these, having been made, these things having been done, having been made, Cornelius, the one angrier, by a little bit ablative